I first met Osric Lysett just before his class began. In the first semester of my third year at university, we had a new module called the Financial Times Guide to Investing. I walked into the lecture hall alone, clutching my textbook, surrounded by the scattered chatter of my classmates. I put one earphone in and unconsciously slowed my pace. "You're late," a male voice called from behind me. I hurriedly mumbled sorry and rushed into the classroom without looking up. I quickly spotted an empty seat in the back corner and was about to head there when I heard the person who had followed me and say, "There are no seats at the back. Come to the front row." I froze on the spot. Reluctantly, I turned and walked to the front row, grateful to find it completely empty, a small consolation. The man who had addressed me as you strode directly to the lectern. I heard a collective intake of breath behind me, followed by a ripple of whispers. I arranged my book and notebook on the desk. When I looked up, I saw the man writing two bold words on the blackboard. Osric Lysett. He adjusted the gold-rimmed glasses perched on his aquiline nose and looked out at the lecture theater. I quickly lowered my head and opened my book as his pleasant voice rang out, "My name is Osric Lysett, and I'll be teaching you the Financial Times Guide to Investing this term." Then came the sound of him flipping through his notes. He seemed oblivious to the murmurs from below, focused solely on what he needed to teach. Surprisingly, my usually restless classmates were remarkably quiet during Mr. Lysett's lecture. I found this quite pleasant. I thought the Financial Times Guide to Investing might become my favorite module at university, right up until the end of the class. "Gillian Tennant," Mr. Lysett's voice rang out from the lectern. All eyes darted around before settling on me. I could only stand up stiffly, staring intently at the textbook on my desk, bracing myself for Mr. Lysett's question. But Mr. Lysett didn't ask anything. Instead, he said, "You'll be the class representative for this module." I, Gillian Tennant, a socially anxious person, felt like I was about to shatter into pieces upon hearing those words. Tomorrow is the financial markets class, and today my dormitory door was nearly knocked down by the girls. I opened the door, my eyes scanning from the face of the girl in front to finally resting on her pink pajamas. The girl handed her workbook to me, sweetly saying, "Class rep, here's my assignment." I saw her name on the cover of the workbook. It seemed familiar, yet I couldn't quite place it. I took the workbook from her hand. It was only after Winifred Ferrier left that I remembered why her name was so familiar. During the first year's student registration, she had insisted on helping me with my luggage and even suggested we share a room. I placed her workbook on top of a stack of others and opened my recently closed laptop. On the computer screen was a niche economics forum I had stumbled upon in my first year. At the time, I thought I might learn something from it. 2 years on, and I'm still hooked. The chat room icon in the top right corner blinked. It was the avatar I knew best. I quickly clicked on it, and the dialog box popped up on the page. "Oh." A simple word. I knew it was in response to my message from yesterday. I nodded instinctively and began typing on the keyboard. "I just can't understand why they made me class rep." After sending it, thinking the other person might not reply so quickly, I started to organize the workbooks my classmates had just given me. Sighing as I sorted, I really didn't want to be the class rep. Just as I finished organizing, a new message appeared in the dialog box. "Then speak up, say you don't want to be class rep." I can't say it. I couldn't even manage to say a word to Osric Lysett. This time the reply came quickly. "Then be the class rep, it's not a big deal." "I'll say it." I furiously typed on the keyboard. Looking at the good luck message sent by the other person, I felt a surge of courage rush to my head. I clutched the workbooks and dashed all the way to Osric Lysett's office. The door was closed, so I freed one hand to knock. "The door's not locked." His voice was so pleasant, but unfortunately, every word he said felt like a death sentence to me. I mustered up the courage to open the door. It was a private office with only Osric Lysett inside. "All the assignments collected?" Osric Lysett looked up from behind his computer. Feeling his gaze, I quickly lowered my head and walked to his desk, placing the assignments on it. "Sir, could I not be the class rep?" I stammered. The sound of Osric Lysett clicking his mouse stopped, and his gaze fell on me. "Why don't you want to do it?" "Ah." Why did he have to ask? I don't like it," I managed. Why don't you like it? Osric Lycett's voice was emotionless. I burst into tears. Goodbye, sir. I blurted out. It wasn't until I reached the bottom of the teaching building that I realized I had forgotten to close the door to Osric Lycett's office when I ran out. Suddenly, every breeze that blew past my ears carried a deadly embarrassment. Have you told him yet? I had just sat down at my computer when I saw the new message pop up in the chat window. It's so embarrassing. I have a financial markets lecture tomorrow, and I don't know if I can call in sick if I sleep without a duvet tonight. I typed it all out in one go and sent it. Soon after, a long message came back from the other side. As the class representative, if you don't attend the lecture, won't the professor ask other students to bring you the key points? Or tell them to inform you about the homework so you can collect it next time? Just thinking about classmates coming to my dorm tomorrow, asking how I'm feeling and patiently explaining the lecture content to me, made me feel like I was about to explode. The next day, when I arrived at the classroom with dark circles under my eyes, I was surprised to find that the first row, which was usually empty, was already full of students. I happily ran to the back row with my bag, pleased to see that the last few rows were empty. Why is the class representative sitting so far back? Osric Lycett stood at the podium, his gaze passing over the students in front to land on me. Come sit at the front. I must have dug up Osric's ancestors' graves in my past life. I looked at the desks in the front rows, which had no empty seats, and secretly rejoiced while outwardly appearing troubled. Just when I thought I would escape, Winifred Ferrier waved at me. Class rep, you can sit here. I'll move to the back. Why are you so eager to help? I hugged my bag, on the verge of tears, and walked to the first row. Today, I broke my record and looked at Osric several times, each time wishing I could tear him apart and chew him up. Having barely endured the lecture, I originally planned to wait until all the students had left before getting up from my seat. But Osric said, "Class representative, come to my office for a moment." I should have believed my mom when she read my fortune. I was wrong, there really is a hurdle in my 21st year. I'll have to ask her about ways to break this curse when I get home tonight. Osric walked to his desk and sat down. He looked at me standing in the doorway. I twisted my hands behind my back. Aren't you coming to get the homework books? Osric asked with a smile. I walked over and saw a stack of homework books on his desk. The one on top was the one that had been at the bottom yesterday. This meant Osric had already marked them all. Just as my hand touched the homework books, I heard Osric ask about what you said yesterday, regarding being the class representative. Has he agreed? I looked up in excitement, accidentally meeting Osric's gaze. My hand fumbled, and I knocked all the homework books onto the floor. I quickly crouched down to pick up the books from the floor. This was so embarrassing. How could I be so clumsy? I think you're very suitable for this role as class representative. I looked at your homework from yesterday, it was very well done. Osric's voice, tinged with amusement, came from above my head. At that moment, I had just picked up my own book, and my hand trembled. This year, at 21, I was destined for a major crisis. That's what my mom told me after she'd gone to have my fortune read. At the time, I just smiled at her, showing I didn't believe it. But now. That evening, I called my mom. Darling, what did you say? The voice on the other end was very noisy. I held back and asked softly, you said at Christmas that I'd have a major crisis this year. Is there any way to break it? I heard the noise on the other end of the phone stop instantly. My mom was silent for a long time before saying, there is a way to break it. On a day ending with 6, at 10 p.m., go to a secluded place on the west side of your university and pray sincerely for 10 minutes. Darling? What's wrong? Has something happened? My mom added, seemingly suddenly realizing something after explaining the solution. I didn't say anything and just hung up. Tomorrow would be the 16th. I looked at the calendar, running through my mind what secluded places there were on the west side of the university. When I quietly walked to a small grove at the university at 10 p.m. on the 16th, I thought I must have gone mad to believe in such things. But I was already here. Don't you dare! A low growl reached my ears. I shuddered, looking at the dim grove around me, my heart instantly filled with fear. If you don't agree, I'll die right in front of you. A faint female voice came through. Good heavens! What a shocking drama this was. Why couldn't I move a step? After a rustle, the man let out a muffled groan, followed by a woman's scream. Get out of here, now! The man growled. This voice sounded familiar, but before I could recall where I'd heard it before, I heard someone running away in high heels. What should I do? My legs felt like they were filled with lead. My mind was screaming to run, but I could barely move an inch. Just as I mustered the courage to take a step, the person from the grove came out. I had just started to sprint when I heard the sound of something heavy falling to the ground. I knew that at this moment, curiosity might not kill the cat, but it could definitely kill a person. Despite this, I still turned back. A man had fallen where I had just been standing. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I saw the fruit knife stuck in his stomach, slightly to the right. Blood was flowing onto the ground, and I was completely stunned with fear. Take me to the hospital. I accidentally stabbed myself, he said, grabbing my hand as I crouched down beside him. I glanced at his face and got another shock on top of my already stunned state. It was none other than Osric Lysett. I'm never coming to this grove again, truly. I rushed Osric to the hospital in a panic. A doctor came shortly after and, upon seeing Osric's pale face, snapped at me, "What happened?" His tone made me shudder. The doctor didn't wait for my explanation before wheeling Osric into the emergency room, leaving the corridor suddenly quiet. I don't know how long I waited before a nurse came out. She approached me and said, "Are you a relative of the patient? He's suffering from severe blood loss and needs a transfusion. We need your confirmation." I'm not a relative. But I couldn't speak, so I just followed the nurse's hurried steps. At the blood bank, I finally managed to ask, "What's his blood type?" "Rh negative," the nurse replied, giving me a puzzled look. "We don't have enough in stock. Can you contact anyone with the same blood type to donate?" What a coincidence! Was this why fate brought me to the park tonight? I am. I said softly. The nurse sighed, "Direct relatives can't donate." I quickly shook my head. The nurse looked at me again and said, "Girlfriends shouldn't either, it's risky." Girlfriend? I'm not. By the time my whole face was burning, I quietly said, "He's my professor." As the thin needle pierced my vein, I bit my lower lip slightly. After the donation, I felt a bit dizzy, and my arm was sore and numb. I wondered if this life-saving act would make Osric spare me and choose a different class representative. Without realizing it, I fell asleep on the hospital bed. When I woke up, Osric had come out of surgery and was lying on the bed next to mine. He was frowning slightly, probably in pain as the anesthesia wore off, with beads of sweat on his forehead. Osric wasn't wearing his glasses, his eyes tightly shut, his face pale but still exuding an air of nobility. I came to my senses, realizing I had been staring at his face, and felt my cheeks heat up. The room was so quiet I could only hear our breathing and the ticking of the quartz clock on the wall. I looked up. It was already 6 in the morning. I quickly grabbed my phone and sent a message to my tutor requesting a day off. Just 2 minutes after I sent the message, my phone started ringing. I stared at the ringing phone in my hand, feeling overwhelmed and wishing I could throw it away. "Jillian, what are you saying? Professor Lysett was the one carried out of the university yesterday?" My tutor's voice burst through as soon as I answered. I gripped the phone and mumbled an affirmative. "How was he injured? Why were you with Professor Lysett? Do you need me to come over?" A barrage of questions came at me, and if I could, I would have hung up immediately. But I didn't dare. Just then, a hand reached out and took my phone. "I'm fine. Please grant both Jillian and me a day off." Osric's voice was a bit hoarse. I quickly went outside to fill a thermos with hot water. When I returned, Osric had already ended the call. Anyone who could answer that call for me was a godsend. I poured a cup of water for my savior, who looked at me with a smile and said, "Thank you, my class representative, for saving my life." I'm on the verge of tears. I've been at the hospital for half a day now, but Osric hasn't told me to go home yet. Not only that, I'm now standing outside the ward with the food Osric asked me to fetch, while he's on the phone inside. No need, my class representative is here, and that's enough. I'll sort out the lessons she's missed, Osric's voice carries from inside. I sigh and obediently walk in with the food. As soon as I set out the meal for Osric, the lady who was admitted to the next bed this morning smiles and says, "Young man, your girlfriend is so thoughtful." I quickly glance at Osric. He smiles slightly and starts eating. "No, you need to explain, sir." Even as my face turns completely red, Osric shows no sign of explaining. I hold back, then hold back again, and finally gently tug at the hem of his hospital gown. Osric looks up at me, and I feel my face getting even hotter. "Yes, sir." I grit my teeth and call out softly, unable to get the rest of the words out. Osric's gaze drops from my face, and I hear his clear voice, "This is my student, my class representative." The lady next door is taken aback for a moment, then quickly laughs and hurriedly says, "Oh, you're a teacher. Your students are so grown up, and you're still so young." Osric hums in agreement and continues eating. The lady continues with a forced laugh, her gaze shifting to me. Just as I'm wringing my hands behind my back, Osric looks up again. He looks at me and says, "Aren't you going to eat?" I nod and quickly turn to leave. After just a couple of steps, Osric's lazy voice comes from behind, "Bring me some fruit when you're done." I have to come back again. I dawdle through my meal, and it's only when I reach the fruit shop that I realize Osric didn't tell me what fruit to buy. When I return to the ward with an assortment of fruits, the culprit Osric looks at my pile of various fruits and slightly quirks his lips. "Are you planning to open a fruit shop in the hospital?" It's only 2 hours later that I realize my streak of bad luck is just beginning. I know Osric is handsome, and I know he's popular, but it's only when I see the ward filled with people that I realize the extent of his popularity is beyond what I imagined. Usually in these situations, I would go along with the crowded group and smoothly get pushed into a corner where no one can see me or notice me. But at 21, I have a great calamity, and this calamity is now pointing at me, smiling and saying to everyone, "I owe it all to my class representative this time." If it weren't for her, I might have been in danger. Everyone's gaze follows his hand to me, accompanied by a meaningful sigh. "Oh God! Can someone please get rid of this imp who's tormenting me?" Thankfully, someone changes the subject at this moment. The man leaning against the bed frowns and asks, "Why were you stabbed with a fruit knife?" I'm curious too, and my gaze quickly sweeps across Osric's face, just in time to catch a momentary sadness in his eyes. "A mistake," Osric's voice carries an embarrassed laugh, as if this injury was just due to his own carelessness. "Only I know that yesterday in the small grove, besides him, there was also a woman. Could it be a crime of passion?" This thought runs wild in my head. I stay in the corner, receiving a warning glance, which I know without guessing is from Osric. Osric's recovery was remarkable, almost unnaturally so. "You can be discharged today," the doctor concluded after completing the routine checkup on Osric. It had only been a week since his admission. It was hard to believe he was the same person who had suffered severe blood loss that night. Osric gathered his belongings and, as he reached the door, turned to ask me, "What's the matter? Going to miss this place?" As if. I hurried to catch up with him. For the past week, I'd been splitting my time between the hospital during the day and my dormitory at night. I was exhausted, and I'd noticed that Osric didn't seem to have any family around. Thank goodness it was only for a week. I followed behind Osric, spotting the university gates not far ahead. Victory seemed within reach. Suddenly, Osric stopped and turned to face me. I quickly lowered my gaze, focusing on a nearby patch of grass. "I've spoken with the professors. You won't need to attend separate makeup classes for this week." His pleasant voice drifted towards me. Brilliant. It was rare to hear something I wanted to hear from him. "I'll be tutoring you on these subjects myself." "It's more convenient that way," Osric said as he turned and entered the university grounds. What did he mean? How was this more convenient? For whom? Never mind, I thought. I'll just head back to my room and have a lie down. I was truly knackered. I was woken by a knock at the door. When I came to, it was already dark. I'd slept the entire afternoon away. As I opened the door, Winifred poked her head in, startling me and causing me to take a couple of steps back. "Class rep, you're really back. I heard Mr. Lysett had returned, so I figured you must be back too, Winifred said as she walked in. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to politely get rid of this unexpected visitor, but she seemed oblivious to my thoughts. Class rep, I noticed it must be quite lonely living by yourself, so I've just been to see the dormitory manager. I'm moving in with you. Last time I was here, I saw you had a spare bed, Winifred said excitedly, pointing at the vacant bed opposite mine. I should have been angry, but my internal struggle left me speechless. Oh, Jillian, this habit of yours will be the death of you one day. Even someone as oblivious as Winifred couldn't miss my furrowed brow. She came closer and took my hands in hers. I instinctively pulled away, taking a step back to maintain a safe distance. Class rep, when the dorm assignments were made, there were only supposed to be 2 of us. My only roommate dropped out this term for some reason, Winifred said, blinking her eyes at me. I'm scared living alone. Please take pity on me and let me stay. No wonder she'd been so enthusiastic the first time she came up. That very night, Winifred arrived with her bedding. It seemed my 21st year was going to be quite the ordeal. How's that teacher of yours doing? A new message popped up on my screen. I suddenly remembered that a few days ago, I had left a message telling my online friend about Osric Lysett's incident, fearing they might not be able to find me otherwise. But when I logged in today, I realized they hadn't been online for several days either. He's fine now, I typed softly on the keyboard. After sending it, I began to type out a sentence that had been bottled up inside me for a long time. I suspect he was the victim of a crime of passion. While it's true that I'm socially anxious, I'm also one of those people who loves a bit of gossip. Such an exciting piece of news, I could only share with my online friend. In the past, I used to chat with them about this and that, and they would always respond with a simple or oh. This suited me perfectly, as I only had the desire to vent. If they had said more, I wouldn't have known how to respond, which would have been awkward. But today was clearly different. Faced with such a thrilling piece of information, my online friend finally succumbed to the irresistible law of gossip. I could sense their overwhelming curiosity from their reply, which suddenly sparked a great desire in me to share more. That day, I was just passing by the small grove, and guess what? I heard a woman's voice, quite pleasant actually. Later, the woman ran away, and when Mr. Lysett came out, he collapsed. I couldn't let them know I was there to prevent a disaster. I typed it all out in one go and sent it, finally concluding. In my opinion, he must have wronged a girl with an extreme personality, which led to such a tragedy. He even told others that he accidentally stabbed himself. I mean, who would stab themselves in the stomach with a fruit knife for no reason? I was very satisfied with my deduction, but my online friend didn't respond immediately. Just when I thought they weren't interested in this matter, they slowly replied. Could it be that the woman was trying to commit suicide, and your teacher got stabbed while trying to save her? Were they doubting my deductive abilities? Although I might not be as good as them in financial analysis, I've read many detective novels. I felt insulted. No way. You don't know what kind of person Mr. Lysett is. He's got that face of a cultured scoundrel. Young girls these days fall for his type. He must have hurt that poor girl. Jillian, aren't you going to sleep? Winifred's voice came from across the room. We have an early class tomorrow, you know. Winifred said calling me class rep made us sound too formal, so she insisted on calling me Jillian. Although we weren't really that close, I just couldn't refuse her. I quickly said goodnight to my online friend and closed my laptop. On the way to class, after the 8th time I shook off Winifred's hand, she finally realized the seriousness of the situation. She turned to look at me and said seriously, Jillian, we've got 2 minutes before the bell rings. We'll be late. I knew that, of course. I just didn't want to walk into the building with so many people, that's why I left the dorm later. But I didn't say anything, nor did I quicken my pace. Then I noticed Winifred's steps slowed down, gradually matching my rhythm. Jillian, I've noticed you're a bit different, her words resonated beside me. I had tried so hard to appear normal, to lower my presence as much as possible, just so others wouldn't notice my differences. Winifred stopped. She turned her head to look at me, but that's okay. Everyone has something special about them. The sunlight fell on her face, making her smile even brighter. For the first time, I really looked at her face and felt a strange warmth in my heart, just like the sunlight shining on me. There was only one lecture in the morning. As I was packing my bag after class, a shadow suddenly fell across my desk. I looked up to see a group of people standing in front of me. To hide my discomfort, I hastened my movements. "What do you want?" Winifred noticed and stood up. I could have cried. Now I finally understood the value of having friends. The group ignored her. One of them placed a folded note on my desk. "Jillian, I'm waiting for your reply." Before I could process what was happening, they had left. What was this? Reply to what? I blinked at the conspicuous folded paper on my desk. "Jillian, come to my office." Osric's voice came from the doorway. I looked up startled, only to see his retreating back. Winifred seemed equally puzzled, scratching her head as she watched Osric walk away. "Gil, why does Mr. Lysett want you in his office?" She turned to me. I suddenly remembered what Osric had said to me at the school gate yesterday. "Extra lessons," I said casually, stuffing everything from my desk into my bag and slowly standing up. By the time I had dawdled my way to Osric's office, 10 minutes had passed. Now, if I went in, it would be just Osric and me in there, even more terrifying than being in the hospital. Before I could knock, Osric's voice came from inside. "Come in." How could such a pleasant voice become my death knell? Osric stood up, removing his glasses. He walked towards me step by step, unhurriedly unbuttoning his shirt cuffs as he approached. How could he make such a simple action so captivating? As he reached my side, his cool fragrance enveloped me. I couldn't help but take a step back, but he put his arm around me. Then I heard a click as the door closed, followed by another click. He had locked the door. At that moment, all those news headlines about female university students flashed through my mind. I'm only 21. Just because I'm socially anxious doesn't mean I don't want to experience the beauty of this world. As I was lost in these wild thoughts, Osric leaned in. He reached out and pinched my earlobe, sending a shiver through me. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "What did Crispin say to you?" "Who's Crispin?" Seeing no response from me, he increased the pressure on my earlobe. I was on the verge of tears, my voice trembling. "Who's Crispin?" As soon as I spoke, I caught a glimpse of a spark in Osric's eyes, which had been as dark as night. Osric's hand stopped rubbing my earlobe, and the arm around my waist dropped. He returned to his seat, slowly rebut-toning his cuffs. Osric pointed to the desk behind him and said, "Sit here. Today we'll start with statistical methods for research workers." Was everything just now my imagination? I quickly turned back to look at the locked door. But Osric clearly didn't share my confusion. He tapped the desk in good spirits. "Aren't you coming over?" I shuffled over and obediently sat down, my hands tightly gripping the edges of my bag. I said in a small voice, "Sir, I didn't bring it." Not only did I not bring it, I didn't even want extra lessons. Osric seemed to have anticipated this. He took a book out of his drawer and placed it on my desk. The words "statistical methods for research workers" struck my very soul. I looked at the book with a dejected face. If we were going through this, I wouldn't be leaving this office today. Osric leaned on my desk with both hands. His voice came from above. "You brought your notebook at least, right?" Sunlight fell on the book, dust motes dancing in the air, and all I could think about was the cool scent Osric had brought with him when he leaned in. I hurriedly reached for my bag, suddenly all fingers and thumbs. Yes, I did. Crash, the contents of my bag spilled all over the floor. Indeed, Osric was my nemesis, and his office even more so. Osric bent down and picked up the folded note from the ground with 2 fingers, placing it to the right of me as I was solving problems. His voice carried an emotion I couldn't quite place. "What's this?" I was stuck on a difficult question and only glanced briefly at the note beside me, not immediately recalling what it was. "Don't know," I mumbled, continuing with the problem at hand. I hadn't left the office all day, even lunch was brought back by Osric. Finishing the last question, I put down my pen and stretched. A week's worth of maths lessons, caught up in just one day, and my shaky foundation had been solidified. I couldn't help but admire Osric a little. As if sensing my thoughts, Osric, who had been reading, took off his glasses and turned to look at me. It seemed Osric only wore glasses during lectures and while reading. Without them, he lost some of that bookish charm, gaining a touch of coolness instead. All done? Osric walked over. I nodded, showing him my completed work. He glanced at it briefly, then nodded. I'll walk you back to your dormitory. No, it's not necessary. I mumbled, looking down at my hastily packed bag. But Osric clearly wasn't going to listen to me. He walked to the door, hand on the lock, and looked back. Or perhaps you'd like to stay here? As if. I quickly stood up, clutching my bag. It wasn't until we left the building that I realized how late it was, with hardly anyone around outside. I breathed a sigh of relief, walking a few steps behind Osric. As I watched Osric's back, I suddenly remembered the female voice from the grove. Was this how he lured unsuspecting girls? Osric stopped. That fruit knife really did slip in by accident. I was startled and stopped as well. After a moment, I realized what he was referring to, and my face suddenly went cold. Oh. Yes, it was an accident. Osric sighed but said nothing more. When I got back to the dormitory, Winifred had already changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed. Hearing my heavy breathing, she poked her head out. Jillian, why are you panting so hard? I shook my head. I'd run up the stairs as soon as I reached the dorm building. How could I not be out of breath? I quickly went to drink some water and noticed the weight of the kettle as I lifted it. When I went to get water earlier, I filled your kettle too, Winifred said, ducking back into bed. Her voice came from inside. I've noticed you don't like going to crowded places, so I can help with these things from now on. Those words gently touched my heart, causing a tidal wave of emotion. Her bed didn't have curtains yesterday. She must have bought them after classes today. I looked at the kettle in my hand, then at her pink bed curtains, and smiled. Winifred, thank you, I said softly. What's there to thank? I had to get water anyway. Her carefree voice came from behind the curtains. It's not just that, not just thanking you for this. Thank you for accommodating my shortcomings. I smiled and started organizing my bag. Oh no! I looked at the Statistical Methods for Research Workers book in my hand. This wasn't mine, it was the one Osric had given me. Not only had I brought it back, but I'd even bent the corner. When Osric gave it to me, it was a clean, tidy book. And now, I looked at the textbook in my hand, battered from being in my bag. I'm dead, just let me die now. At this moment, Winifred came down from her bed. Jillian, what did Crispin write in the note he gave you today? She stared at the mess I'd made. Crispin again? Who's Crispin? Winifred turned to look at me, and after a while calmly explained, the one who gave you the note after class today. He's in our class, plays for the school basketball team, quite popular with the girls. My eyes moved slightly, remembering that someone had indeed given me a note after class, but I hadn't looked at it before going to Osric's office. I temporarily put down the statistics book and started rummaging through the mess. Couldn't find it. Checked the compartments of my bag again. Still couldn't find it. Something flashed in my mind, and I remembered the note Osric had picked up from the ground and placed beside me. I stiffly turned to ask Winifred, what do you think he wrote in his note? Winifred blinked. Well, it certainly wasn't asking about homework. This is how online friends often reply to messages. I looked at the message I had sent him, and my face flushed again. Yes, he even locked the office door today. And he hugged me. In all my life, apart from my late father, I've never had physical contact with a man. Is it strange to lock the door during tutoring? A new message popped up in the chat box. Isn't it strange? I stared at the screen, lost in thought. It doesn't seem that odd, but he hugged me. It seems he only hugged me when I stepped back. Could it be that my stepping back interfered with him closing the door? Thinking about it this way, it doesn't seem that strange after all. Then I started a new round of conversation with my online friend. A note? A new message appeared in the chat box. Although I've always tried to keep a low profile, I did receive notes in secondary school. The content of those notes was self-explanatory. Maybe he's asking about homework? Aren't you the class representative? My friend sent another message. Why would he use a note to ask about homework? This touched on a gap in my knowledge. My friend, writing it on a note makes it clearer and more concise. That does make sense. I heard from Winifred that he's on the basketball team. He must be very busy with training, so it's possible he doesn't have time to remember the homework. Me, writing notes is quite troublesome. Why doesn't he just message me on WhatsApp? Friend, does he have your WhatsApp? Me, no, I mean if he could think of writing a note, why couldn't he think of using WhatsApp? Friend, what's your WhatsApp number? Seeing this sudden message, my heart skipped a beat. What does he mean? Does he want to add me on WhatsApp? I've never had any intention of turning online friendships into real-life ones. After hesitating for a long time, I slowly replied, I don't really use WhatsApp much. After a long while, just when I thought my online friend might be angry, a new message popped up in the chat box. Tomorrow, if that person asks for your WhatsApp, you should answer like this. Ah. So he was helping me solve a potentially awkward situation tomorrow. He's so kind. I quickly said goodnight and turned off my computer. I put the computer outside the bed and lay down, planning to browse my phone for a while before sleeping. Why is there a red dot on my WhatsApp contacts? I clicked on the red dot notification and saw the friend request. I was so startled I almost threw my phone across the room. It's Osric. The 4 words lay quietly in the message box. I asked Winifred on the opposite bed through the curtain, Winifred, what excuse do you use when you refuse to add someone on WhatsApp? There was a sound of Winifred lifting her bed curtain, her voice filled with excitement. Did Crispin add you? No, it's not him. Winifred sighed and dropped her curtain. Just say you don't know them and won't add them. But I do know him. I know him very well. I clicked in and saw another message added to the box. It's Osric. I know it's you, Osric. My fingers trembling, I pressed the accept button. Is this considered coercion? Looking at the remarks column, I angrily typed in a nickname exclusive to Osric, 21-year-old catastrophe. 21-year-old catastrophe, it's Osric. Me, hello, sir. I need to find another time to visit the small woods. This catastrophe must be dealt with. Osric was acting strange today, very strange indeed. Throughout the entire lesson, his gaze kept sweeping over me time and time again. I'm as sensitive to stares as the average person is to light, so he must have been looking at me repeatedly for me to have such a strong feeling about it. Just as my heart was about to sprout fur from the anxiety, the bell rang signaling the end of class. Thank goodness, thank goodness. I quickly lowered my head to pack my bag, but before I could finish, someone approached my desk. Winifred tugged at my sleeve, and I looked up. It was Crispin. After what happened last night, I had completely forgotten that he was supposed to ask me for the homework. Before Crispin could open his mouth to ask for the assignment, Osric walked up to my desk. Mr. Lycett, Crispin greeted him hastily. Osric adjusted his glasses and then tapped my desk deliberately, pack up and follow me to my office. I glanced at Crispin standing beside him. He stiffly turned around and left the classroom, looking back 3 times as he went. Poor Crispin, he couldn't even ask about the homework. As I watched the doorway, Osric suddenly appeared in my line of sight, his brows furrowed as he looked at me. I hurriedly continued packing my bag and obediently followed Osric to his office. As soon as we stepped inside, I heard the click of the lock as Osric secured the door. Osric withdrew his hand, his long fingers of his left hand first unbuttoning his right cuff, then using his right hand to unbutton his left cuff. This gesture was all too familiar to me. Stay away from Crispin Yardley from now on, Osric said as he moved closer to me, his pleasant scent enveloping me. As Osric drew nearer, I instinctively took a step back, not noticing my untied shoelace. My left foot caught, and I fell straight backwards. But I didn't hit the ground. I looked up at Osric, who had caught my hand with one of his and wrapped his other arm around my waist. Was this a coincidence? Why was he holding me again? Was this some kind of magic button? Lock the door and embrace me. I said stay away from Crispin, not from me, Osric whispered in my ear. His voice floated softly into my ear, accompanied by his warm breath. Mr. Lysett? My voice was barely audible from within his embrace. Osric had clearly heard me, as his grip on my wrist tightened slightly. He looked down at me, his eyes so dark they could pull you in. Did you hear me? He asked. I was momentarily stunned, not thinking to look away from his gaze. Osric pinched the soft flesh at my waist. I shuddered and quickly replied, why yes, I heard. Osric continued to rub my wrist, his touch alternating between gentle and firm. His voice took on a seductive tone. What did you hear? To stay away from Crispin Yardley, I answered obediently. Osric narrowed his eyes, satisfied with my response. He gave my wrist another squeeze before releasing his hand from my waist. Just as I was wondering how to escape this precarious situation, Osric tapped the desk. Aren't you coming over? There it was again. Osric took a book from his drawer, the words Management Accounting for Decision Makers prominent on the cover. I thought you surely wouldn't have brought it, he said casually, leaning against the desk. I immediately walked over and sat down, pulling out my prepared copy of Management Accounting for Decision Makers and placing it on the desk with a thud. I have it! Osric raised an eyebrow and returned his book to the drawer. Give me your statistical methods for research workers as well, his voice came from above me. Statistical methods for research workers was still under my pillow. I thought sleeping on it might help flatten it out a bit. I opened the book in my hands and said in a low voice, I didn't bring it. It was already quite late when I left the lecture hall. A monotonous ringtone cut through the quiet night. Osric took his phone out of his pocket and stared at the screen for 10 seconds before pressing the answer button. I heard someone crying on the other end, Osric. I recognized that voice. It was the same one from that night in the small grove. The tangled mess of thoughts in my mind suddenly scattered. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's knowing my place. This was clearly a private conversation that Osric wouldn't want others to overhear. I could easily head back to the dormitory on my own. With this in mind, I quickened my pace, intending to walk past Osric and return to my room. Just as I was passing by him, he caught my hand. I turned my head to see his eyes, dark and intense behind his glasses, as if they could pull me in. Don't call again, Osric said in a low voice, identical to the one I'd heard in the grove that day. I saw him quickly end the call, and before I could react, he pulled me into his arms. This embrace was different from the previous two, this one felt real. Just for a moment, Osric murmured, burying his face in the crook of my neck. This was my first time experiencing something like this. What should I do? What should I do? My hands, which initially wanted to push him away, ended up gently patting his back. Professor. I stammered, unsure of what to do. Osric tightened his hold, pulling me even closer. Jillian, he lifted his head, resting his chin on my shoulder, his voice slightly hoarse, what am I to do? You came to me on your own. What on earth? Why has Osric been acting so strangely lately? When I returned to the dormitory, Winifred was just about to climb into her bed. Seeing me return, she came back down and sat beside me, grinning. Professor Lysett is so dedicated, tutoring you until this late every day. Before I could respond, Winifred continued, Crispin came to see me today. It took me a moment to remember who Crispin was. He asked me for your WhatsApp, Winifred said with a wink. I was taken aback. He really wants to use WhatsApp to ask about homework? Winifred burst into laughter at my response. I couldn't understand what was so funny. Finally, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes, she patted my shoulder and said, Oh, Jillian, dear. Asking for your WhatsApp isn't about homework at all. Then what is it about? Whatever it is, I'm not close to him anyway. I lowered my head and started packing my bag. Please don't give my WhatsApp to anyone. Winifred tapped on my desk, her voice sounding a bit dejected. How could I give it out? I don't even have your WhatsApp myself. I secretly stuck out my tongue. The number of contacts in my WhatsApp was pitifully small. Now, including Osric, there were only 3 people. Jillian, what's your WhatsApp? I'll add you, Winifred said, taking out her phone. I looked at my phone. No need. I don't really use WhatsApp much. Just then, my phone lit up. 21-year-old crisis, tomorrow, the intelligent investor. I stiffly turned my head to see Winifred's gaze fixed on my phone screen. Osric always manages to make things awkward for me at the worst possible moment. What on earth did I do to him in my past life to deserve this? After class, Osric didn't appear at the door. I looked at the copy of The Intelligent Investor in my bag, feeling conflicted. If Osric hadn't called for me, did that mean I didn't need to go? But he had messaged me on WhatsApp yesterday. Did he expect me to take the initiative and find him? With a heavy heart, I made my way to Osric's office. The door was still ajar, and through the gap, I spotted a woman in red high heels inside. "Darling," the woman's voice came from within. It was the same voice from yesterday's phone call. The same voice from that day in the woods. Osric's would-be lover had come to find him, and I had the misfortune of stumbling upon the scene. Compared to that day in the woods, I now felt not only embarrassed but also a twinge of inexplicable jealousy. "Get out," Osric growled, his voice low as if suppressing something. I knew eavesdropping was wrong, but Osric had asked me to come, so it wasn't entirely intentional, was it? "Osric, don't forget who gave birth to you." The woman's voice rose sharply. I heard the sound of a chair moving, followed by Osric's low voice, "I wish I'd never been born. My birth disgusts me." No sooner had he finished speaking than a sharp slap echoed out. Just as I was debating whether to leave, the door suddenly opened from the inside. I looked up, startled, and found myself face to face with Osric. His eyes were pitch black, giving his entire face a fierce expression. When he saw me, a flicker of light passed through his eyes. I glanced past him and saw the heavily made-up woman behind. I quickly lowered my head. "Sir. I didn't mean to." I was on the verge of tears. I truly hadn't meant to listen. Osric didn't respond to me. Instead, he turned to the woman behind him and said, "Leave, or face the consequences." His voice was so cold it made me shiver. Then I heard the sound of high heels approaching. The woman paused beside me for a few seconds, her gaze lingering on me, before walking away. Before I could react, Osric pulled me into the office with one hand. He slammed the door shut and locked it. Frightened, I looked up at him to see him removing his glasses and tossing them onto the desk, his hands moving urgently to undo his cuffs. Without his glasses, his eyes seemed even darker, reflecting only my image. I suddenly felt panicked. "Mr. Lycett." Osric advanced towards me, and I instinctively backed up against the door. His right hand seized both of mine, pinning them above my head against the door. "What did you hear?" His chin rested on my shoulder, his breath hot on my neck. I didn't hear anything," I cried. Osric was becoming increasingly strange. He tightened his grip on my hands, pressing them firmly against the door. "It doesn't matter if you did hear," Osric's voice suddenly turned infinitely gentle in my ear, "if I lock you up, you won't be able to run away." I trembled. What did he mean? I really hadn't heard anything. Osric lifted his head from my shoulder. With his left hand, he tilted my chin up, forcing me to look at him. The right side of his face still bore a faint handprint, evidence of how hard the slap had been. "Jillian, shall I lock you up?" Osric's grip on my hands tightened again, his murmured words impossibly tender. My hands hurt. But seeing Osric's expression, which didn't look like he was joking at all, I gave it serious consideration. He said he wanted to lock me up, not kill me. Locking me up meant keeping me inside, and staying inside meant no socializing. I looked at him and nodded seriously, "All right." I couldn't help but gasp as Osric's eyes focused intently on me. He gently released my hand, looking a bit flustered. Unlike before, Osric didn't fasten his cufflinks. Instead, he softly guided me to the desk, his hand lightly touching my waist as I perched on its edge. "Does it hurt?" Osric's fingertips grazed my wrist. His head was bowed, and I could only see his smooth hair, not his expression. I withdrew my hand slightly, then shook my head. Realizing he might not see the gesture, I whispered, "It doesn't hurt." In truth, it hurt terribly. The pain nearly brought tears to my eyes, but Osric seemed off somehow. "Please don't run away, will you?" Osric's voice carried a pleading tone, like a soft punch straight to my heart. I stared at the top of his head, unsure how to respond. Professor. Osric lifted his head. Sunlight streamed through the window, bathing his face in warmth. Yet it seemed unable to reach him fully. His eyes were slightly red, so unlike his usual self, and my heart melted completely. Just as I wondered what might happen next, my mobile vibrated once. In the quiet office, the sound was jarringly loud. I offered an awkward smile, gently pulling my hand from his grasp to retrieve the offending device from my pocket. It was a text message, from an unknown number. 3 messages in quick succession. Hello Jillian, this is Crispin Yardley. I called out to you after class, but you didn't seem to hear. So I got your number from the tutor. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to ask about your thoughts on what I mentioned the other day. Before I could read the third message, Osric snatched the phone away. His eyes darkened as he swiped the screen a few times. When I reached for the phone, he caught my hand with his free one, then switched off the device and tossed it onto another desk. The docile expression that had been on Osric's face moments ago vanished instantly. Didn't I tell you to stay away from Crispin Yardley? Osric leaned in close. Seeing his hands planted on either side of me, I relaxed somewhat, knowing he wouldn't hurt me again. Osric moved to my ear, his voice husky and hard to decipher. What am I to do? Jillian won't listen to me. Osric raised his hand and gently rubbed my earlobe, causing me to freeze completely. Perhaps I need to lock you away to make you obey, he murmured, his tone almost coaxing. I was finally certain now. He was just like the Yandere characters from those novels I read. The scene I had imagined in my fantasies was now unfolding before me. This time, it was my turn to feel excited. I turned to look at him, biting my lip before gathering the courage to ask, "Can you really lock me away?" Osric paused, taken aback. I tugged lightly at his sleeve, asking earnestly, "If I'm locked away, does that mean I can graduate without attending classes?" Osric blinked. I continued, "Does it mean I can stay indoors all the time, with food and drink provided?" Osric took a step back, slowly fastening his cufflinks. I hopped off the desk, about to speak when I saw Osric put on his glasses. "Take out The Intelligent Investor," he said. The midterm exam results were out, and as expected, I ranked first in every subject in my major. I took my report card and went to Osric's office, eager to share the good news and praise him for his guidance. However, I found his office empty. As usual, he had left the door unlocked for me. I pushed it open and gently closed it behind me. The familiarity of these actions made me realize how accustomed I had become to my interactions with Osric. I had never been one to take initiative, yet lately, I found myself coming to Osric's office of my own accord. Had I changed? Had my social anxiety improved? Just then, the door opened from the outside. Thinking it was Osric returning, I looked up with a smile, only to see the woman who had appeared in this office the other day. I quickly lowered my head, my hands fumbling nervously. The woman didn't leave upon seeing me. Instead, she walked towards me, her high heels clicking with each step. "One of Osric's students?" she asked, standing in front of my desk. The overpowering scent of her perfume made me want to crawl under the table in embarrassment. It wasn't that my social anxiety had improved, I had simply grown comfortable with Osric. The woman sat down in Osric's chair and asked in a flippant tone, "Where's Osric?" I stared at the books on my desk, remaining silent. She tapped the desk impatiently. "Go fetch me some water." How dare she? I reluctantly stood up and walked to the water cooler, filling a cup. I clearly saw her red-painted nails grasp the cup, so why did the water end up spilling all over Osric's desk? When the water splashed onto Osric's computer, I froze in shock. I quickly grabbed some tissues and started wiping the water off the computer. "What's going on here?" Osric's voice came from the doorway. I stiffened. The woman stood up to greet him. "Osric, darling." I paused for a second before continuing to wipe the water off the computer. Could water have seeped into the keyboard? As I opened the closed laptop, I heard the woman's soft voice, "Osric, dear, help Mummy one more time." Oh, this wasn't what I had expected at all. "Don't even think about it," Osric's voice was tinged with anger. The woman began to cry. If you don't help me, I'll kill myself right in front of you. Why did I always find myself in these awkward situations? I kept my head down, wiping the water that had seeped into the keyboard. Osric let out a cold chuckle. What? Unsatisfied that you didn't manage to kill me last time? Osric's voice, filled with bitter sarcasm, came from behind me. However, what made me stiffen wasn't just his words, but the computer screen I had accidentally opened. On the screen was a forum I knew all too well, with an avatar in the top right corner that I recognized instantly. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the chat box. Do you think Professor Lysett likes me? The last message, sent last night, was from my avatar. The joke was on me. Logically, I should be confronting Osric about him being my online friend, but looking at him standing in the doorway, I suddenly felt a pang of sympathy. Osric, darling, how can you say such things? I'm your mother. The woman standing opposite him looked visibly hurt. Osric wore a frightening smile, his eyes dull behind his glasses. Even the bright sun outside couldn't penetrate his gaze. Mother? Osric removed his glasses, folding them. Are you worthy of that title? Or should I say, I'm just a pawn for you to extort money? Osric's voice was as cold as his gaze, chilling to the bone. Then, that hand with red-painted nails struck Osric's clean face. With a sharp slap, Osric's face turned slightly, his pale cheek quickly reddening. That slap felt like it struck my heart, a dull ache spreading from deep within. As if possessed, I walked over to Osric's side and gently wrapped my hand around his clenched fist. His hand was ice cold. Mrs. Lysett, perhaps you should leave now, I said, head bowed, as I pulled Osric aside to clear the way to the door. The woman took a couple of steps in her high heels, stopping in front of us. She pulled a card from her bag and tossed it on the floor. Osric, you weren't really harmed by that incident years ago. Why can't you let it go? Unless I'm dead, you'll never be rid of me. With that, she left. I quickly closed the door behind her. I turned and embraced Osric. His body was cold. It's all right now, it's over, I said softly, patting his back. Osric rested his head on my shoulder. He placed his glasses on a nearby table and slowly began unbuttoning his cuffs. I noticed someone seemed to be standing in the window of the building opposite. Oh no! The curtains weren't drawn. I tried to push Osric away to close the curtains, but he tightened his grip around my waist, holding me close. Jillian, I'm tainted, Osric murmured, his voice faint against my shoulder. My heart ached. Professor. Osric's arms tightened around my waist, as if trying to meld us into one. At first, I thought you were too pure for me, Osric nuzzled my shoulder. But then, time and again, I couldn't resist. If you try to run, I'll have to lock you away. Osric's breath was warm on my neck, his voice husky. Lock you away, so you'll belong only to me. All right, I whispered. This response was like a magic button. Usually, just agreeing was enough to bring Osric back to normal. But this time, Osric remained still, his head on my shoulder. Jillian, I'm not normal. My nose stung, I knew he wasn't normal. The hand on his back patted gently as I smiled. Professor, I'm not normal either. Suddenly, something flashed in my mind. I glanced at Osric, then at the computer on his desk. I quickly ran through my chat history with my online friend. A sheepish smile spread across my face. Professor, when did you realize that Yang was me? Osric seemed taken aback by my sudden change of subject. He paused for a moment. As he rebut-toned his cuffs, he looked at me with a smile. From the very beginning. What did he mean by the very beginning? Which beginning? Did that mean he knew everything I'd said to my online friend was actually me? I walked behind Osric, staring at his back. I bit my lip and said, Professor. What if I told you I'm not young? Would you believe me? Osric stopped and turned to look at me. Right, he didn't believe me. I swore to myself I'd never mess with online friends again. A crime of passion? Osric walked towards me. A wolf in sheep's clothing? I glanced at the open dormitory doors not far away, muttered goodbye, Professor, and dashed off. Because of this incident, I tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep, and ended up falling ill. When Winifred handed me her phone, I was lying in bed staring at the screen, feeling completely numb. It was a post on our university forum with a glaring headline, "The Untold Story Between the Youngest Professor on Campus and His Star Pupil." The photo showed Osric with his arm around my waist, his head resting on my shoulder. I remembered seeing someone in the building opposite at the time. That must have been who took the photo. How can they tell it's Professor Lycett from just this back view? I stiffly handed the phone back to Winifred. Winifred leaned in close. "Don't you know? That office is special, just for Professor Lycett. No other lecturer gets their own office." I had no idea. No wonder no one ever came to that office. Winifred looked at me in shock. "No way, Jillian. The rumors about you and Professor Lycett are all over the university, and you still don't know about his background?" My mind was still on that photo I'd just seen. I asked absent-mindedly, "What background? Have you heard of Lycett Limited?" Winifred asked mysteriously. I nodded. This I did know. Lycett Limited was one of the top tech companies in the country. The forum I frequented often used Lycett Limited as a case study for analysis. Professor Lycett is only 28. How can he teach at our university straight away? Have his own office, only teach financial markets and nothing else? It's because he's the son of Lycett Limited's chairman. What an incredible revelation. I thought back to Osric's every move, remembering the 2 slaps he'd received. I simply couldn't imagine him having such a background. Winifred pounced on me, grabbing my arm and winking. "Jillian, you've been keeping quiet about striking it rich. Don't forget about me when you make it big." I forced a laugh and carefully extracted my arm from her grip. Never mind that there was nothing between Osric and me. Even if there was, just thinking about what I'd have to go through made me want to disappear from the face of the earth. Just then, my phone rang. I picked it up to see an unknown number. I answered. "Come downstairs," Osric's voice came through the phone. How did Osric have my number? I glanced out at the pitch-black sky, clutching my phone. "Professor, it's very late." Osric cut me off before I could finish. "Bring a hat." He hung up before I could say anything. "Professor Lycett?" Winifred looked at my phone. I didn't answer her. I put my phone back in my pocket, got up from the bed, and took a baseball cap from the wardrobe to put on my head. As I walked to the door under Winifred's gaze, I gripped the lock, biting my lip before turning back to her. "Don't tell anyone." Winifred nodded blankly, and only then did I open the door and leave. It was very late, and Osric was the only one standing under an inconspicuous tree at the dormitory entrance. He was also wearing a hat, the brim pulled low. If you didn't look closely, you wouldn't be able to tell who he was. I walked up to him, thinking he might have seen that photo too, and quietly called out, "Professor." Osric reached out and took my hand. I didn't know how long he'd been waiting here. His fingers were ice cold. "Come with me," Osric said, his voice soft in the night air. I looked at our intertwined hands, thought of the forum post, and felt my face quickly heat up. Apart from my parents, no one had ever touched me without making me uncomfortable. So this is what it's like to like someone. It's so easy. When I realized I was different from others, I never thought there would be a day like this. When Osric brought me to an apartment building, I began to sense that things might not be as simple as they seemed. As we entered the flat, I suddenly realized it was the middle of the night, and a man and woman alone together might not be entirely appropriate. Though I'm an adult, I've always had my principles. Unless Osric were to confess his feelings for me right then and there. "I've arranged for your absence to be excused. It's best if you stay here until things blow over," Osric said as he moved in front of me. It took me a few seconds to process what he'd said. Osric was truly a godsend. If he hadn't brought me here tonight, I dread to think what might have happened to me tomorrow. Then I heard his voice, slightly husky. "Jillian, may I tie you up?" I glanced at his well-fastened cufflinks, wondering how he could have such urges without even loosening them first. Osric looked up at me, his gaze intense and determined. I placed my free hand over his and said earnestly, "Sir, must you really?" If you lock the door, I promise I won't run away. I'd be more than happy to stay in this flat until the end of time, especially since my absence had already been arranged. But clearly, Osric wasn't one to listen to me, at least not when he was in this state. I lay on the bed, staring at the chain on my wrist, feeling somewhat exasperated. Sir, it doesn't seem right for us to share a bed. Especially while chained together. As an educated adult, I couldn't help but have some inappropriate thoughts. Osric turned to face me, the chain clinking with his movement. Why not? He asked. I sighed. Let's just sleep. But I couldn't sleep. I'd never shared a bed with anyone since I was old enough to remember, let alone while chained to them. Osric wasn't sleeping well either. In the dim light, I could see beads of sweat on his forehead. I wanted to wipe them away, but even the slightest movement made the chain rattle, so I decided against it. Stay back! Osric cried out suddenly. I was startled and quickly turned to look at him. He was shaking his head slightly, his face contorted in anguish. Stay back! Stay back! His shouts gradually took on a barely perceptible sob. He must be having a nightmare. That faint, almost undetectable sob pierced my heart. Disregarding the chain, I reached out and took his hand, calling to him softly, Sir, sir. After calling him twice, Osric's expression began to calm. The deep furrow between his brows gradually smoothed out. After a while, thinking he had settled down, I was about to let go of his hand. But his hand gripped mine tightly, causing the chain to make a crisp sound as it moved. Jillian, don't leave me, he said, his voice small and uncertain. Looking at his tightly closed eyes, I felt a pang in my chest. I gently patted the duvet covering him with my other hand. I won't, I promised. I glanced at the iron bracelet wrapped in cloth on my wrist, then at the chain connecting it to the floor, and sighed. I had finally achieved the life I had always dreamed of. The door was locked from the outside, and the room was stocked with ingredients Osric had prepared. Except for the somewhat cumbersome chain on my wrist, everything was to my utmost satisfaction. The length of the chain had been calculated precisely, I could reach every part of the room except the door. I began exploring Osric's house. Suddenly, I came across a closed door. I gently turned the handle, and with a creak, the room opened, releasing a musty smell. I quickly felt for the light switch on the wall. With a click, the entire room lit up. It was a peculiar study. As soon as I entered, I noticed a photo album lying open on the floor. The page it was open to showed a young boy with delicate features, marred only by a bruise at the corner of his mouth. I picked up the album and began flipping through it page by page. Starting from the first page with a smiling little boy facing the camera, the boy grew older, his smiles becoming increasingly forced, the light in his beautiful eyes fading. The boy reached his early teens, his features becoming more refined, a delicateness between boyhood and girlhood. My fingertips gently traced the face in the photo, which bore a striking resemblance to Osric now. For some reason, the teenage Osric always had bruises on his face and body. In the photos, those eyes, not yet hidden behind glasses, were as cold as if laced with venom. I turned the page, and Osric's photos abruptly ended after his early teens. Just as I thought the album had concluded, I saw a photo of myself on the last page. What are you doing? Osric's cool voice came from the doorway. Startled, I fumbled, and the album slipped from my hands, landing on the floor with a dull thud. I looked up at Osric in the doorway. His sleeves were unbuttoned, and even his collar was undone. He held the chain connected to me in his hand. His glasses were off, I wasn't sure when he had removed them, and his eyes were filled with unmistakable gloom. Seeing him, I was momentarily at a loss for words. Osric gave a gentle tug on the chain, forcing me to walk towards him. As I neared the door, Osric pulled harder, suddenly yanking me into his arms. Jillian, you've been naughty, Osric's gloomy voice whispered in my ear. At that moment, I recalled those photos of him covered in bruises, and my heart ached. I quickly wrapped my arms around his waist. Mr. Lysett, I'll be good, I said. The photo album must be something very important to Osric. Jillian, you shouldn't have touched it, Osric's tone was gloomy. It was indeed something important to him. I obediently let him hold me. I'm sorry. When I looked at him, his face had already returned to normal. "Jillian, are you afraid? Stay with me." I shook my head. "I'm not afraid." Suddenly, a smile bloomed on Osric's face, his eyes lighting up instantly. He placed his hand on the back of my head, holding me in his arms, and asked with a smile, "Jillian, will you stay with me for a lifetime?" My heart trembled. "Professor, is this a confession?" My voice was slightly shaky. Osric's hand on the back of my head gently rubbed, and he sighed, "I suppose it is." What a heavenly blessing. My 21st year crisis turned into my 21st year romance. The joyful emotions didn't last long, as I noticed some scars on Osric's exposed skin. I insisted on him taking off his shirt to have a look. Then I saw the horrifying sight before me. My fingers trembled as they traced over the scars on his back. Those scars seemed to suddenly grow onto my heart, the pain making me feel suffocated. My eyes welled up involuntarily. "Professor, what is this?" Osric calmly put his shirt back on, as if those scars weren't on his body at all. In the end, Osric didn't tell me how those scars came to be, but he did unlock my chain. I lay in bed, still unable to sleep. I turned my head to look at him, his eyes tightly shut, brows deeply furrowed. He must be having a nightmare again. Just as I was about to reach out to pat him, his hand suddenly gripped mine tightly. "No." Osric held my hand, shaking his head. "Mom, no, I'm scared." I held his hand back, gently comforting him near his ear. "Don't be afraid. If I wasn't sleeping with him, perhaps no one would know that the eloquent man who stands in the classroom becomes so fragile at night." That strange room was locked up, and Osric never fell ill again. I started living a heavenly life with him, without needing to go out. Osric said as long as I completed the assignments he set, passed the exams, and finished my dissertation in my final year, I would be able to graduate smoothly. This was absolutely wonderful news. Everything matched perfectly with the future in my dreams, but dreams always come to an end. One day, I was on the phone with my mom. "Darling, did the method I gave you last time work?" Mom's voice came through from the other end. Remembering the silly thing I had done, I laughed. "Mom, it didn't work." Just as I was about to explain that her fortune-telling was completely inaccurate, the digital lock on the door beeped. At this time, Osric should be in class. The person opening the door definitely couldn't be him. I hung up the phone while Mom was still talking. The man who entered through the door was wearing a suit, his hair impeccably combed. If it weren't for the barely noticeable fine lines on his face, one could never guess his age. But I did, because his face bore a striking 6/10 resemblance to Osric's. It was Osric's father, Barnaby Lycett. There was also a young man following behind him. He wasn't surprised by my presence, which meant he came here for me. "Jillian Tennant?" Barnaby sat opposite me and spoke softly. I looked at his expensive-looking trousers and nodded slightly. I gently placed my phone on the chair behind me and stood up. "Mr. Lycett, would you like something to drink?" Barnaby took a leather envelope from the young man behind him and placed it on the coffee table. "No need, I have a meeting shortly. I'll be leaving soon." My hands twisted together behind my back. "All right." Barnaby pushed the envelope towards me and said, "I don't want you to be with Osric." I froze completely. I had imagined this scene before, given that my family background was indeed worlds apart from Osric's, but experiencing it in reality was still overwhelming. "It's not that I think you're not good enough," Barnaby looked up at me, pointing to the leather envelope in front of me. "You'll understand when you look at it." I didn't want to look. After 10 seconds of standoff, I reached out my hand. When I took hold of the envelope, I suddenly had a premonition that once I opened it, Osric and I would no longer be possible. With this premonition, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of documents, the topmost of which was a photo of a man being imprisoned. I didn't recognize the man, but I recognized his nose and eyes, and the name on the photo. Bertram Tennant. It was my father's name. I knew I had a father who had run off with another woman when I was 1 year old. All I knew about him was his name. And from the time I could remember, the ubiquitous looks of both contempt and pity from the neighbors around us. My fingers trembled. Although Mom had never told me, I had long heard from others that this man had gone to prison. I removed that photo, and beneath it were papers detailing his crimes. He had once provided services to bosses with peculiar tastes, including introducing minors to bosses with special pedophilic tendencies. It's just playing with the boss. This phrase appeared several times in his records. My hand shook slightly, and I no longer had the courage to turn the page. This was a heinous crime. But I still saw Osric's name on a full page of paper. That name that could pierce my heart appeared in this place where it should never have been. My hands shook so much that I couldn't see clearly what was written on it, and my heart felt as if it had been thrown into an ice cellar. Finally, I forced myself to read carefully, word by word, that section of Bertram Tennant's record about Osric. That boss had his eye on Osric right away, right there at his school. I heard he originally had no one to look after him, just a mother who was always out gallivanting. So I contacted his mother. I didn't expect that when his mother heard I could give her £10,000, she agreed without asking what it was about. Osric was clever, he vaguely knew what was going on. He escaped from my hands several times, but was always sent back by his mother. If he hadn't been in a car accident while trying to escape and been sent to the hospital by someone, he wouldn't have gotten away. My tears fell just like that onto the paper, onto Osric's name. Barnaby stood up and pulled the documents from my hands. Without even glancing at the contents, he handed them directly to the man behind him, who put the documents back into the envelope. "Don't tell Osric I was here," Barnaby said, taking a few steps before turning back. "You look a lot like Bertram Tennant. He's already died of illness in prison, yet you're still by Osric's side. In the name of a father, I hope you'll leave." Those were Barnaby Lycett's last words to me. No wonder he kept saying he was dirty over and over again. But it wasn't him who was dirty. In the vast living room, it was so quiet I could only hear my own breathing. I don't know how long I had been staring, but my phone suddenly vibrated. I looked down blankly at the phone on the sofa, displaying Mum calling. As if grasping at a lifeline, I quickly pressed the answer button. Before Mum could speak, I urgently asked, "Mum, is Bertram Tennant dead? Maybe it's just someone with the same name? Maybe Barnaby Lycett was mistaken?" The voice on the other end of the line fell silent after my words, followed by a long, heavy silence. A silence that frightened me. "Darling," Mum's voice on the phone was a bit choked, "I didn't mean to hide it from you, it's just that you were too young. Just pretend this person never existed in this world, all right?" Those words felt like a bucket of cold water poured directly over my head. I had also wanted to pretend this person never existed, I had never acknowledged his existence, but now what am I supposed to do? Osric Lycett, beside me, having nightmares night after night. All because of the beastly things that man did, and perhaps also because of the resemblance between my eyes and brows and that man's. I curled up on the sofa, watching the sunlight through the floor-to-ceiling window slowly change direction as time passed, until it no longer reached the sofa at all. Only then did the front door make a sound again. I didn't go to the door to greet him as usual, because I seemed to lack the courage to face Osric again. Osric walked towards me step by step. He bent down from behind the sofa and wrapped his arms around me. "What's wrong?" He had a particularly pleasant scent, just one whiff could quickly calm my heart. I curved my lips into a smile and shook my head. Osric let go of me and walked around to sit beside me on the sofa. His voice was somewhat cautious. "Do you want to go back to university?" I turned my head to look at him. There was a barely noticeable gloom in his eyes. If it hadn't been for Bertram Tennant back then, would his eyes be filled with dazzling stars instead? Would he have grown up to be a normal, cheerful person? There are too many people at uni. Why would I go back? I smiled, leaning on Osric's shoulder. I rarely showed such affectionate gestures towards him. Osric noticed this too. He lifted my chin and asked with a smile, "Have you done something you feel guilty about?" I nodded and brought out my hidden hand, pretending to be a bit embarrassed. "Sir, I broke a cup today. I had broken it when I was lost in thought, and then cut my finger while cleaning up, also lost in thought." Osric hurriedly cradled my hand, examining the cut on my finger closely, his brow furrowing. He put down my hand and went to the cabinet to fetch the first aid kit. As he applied iodine to my finger, he blew on it gently. "Does it hurt?" My nose stung, and tears welled up in my eyes. I nodded and said in a choked voice, "It hurts a lot. My heart hurts so much. Why did my Osric have to go through such terrible things in the past?" Osric's movements became even gentler, and finally, he carefully placed a plaster on my finger. "Don't clean up by yourself anymore," Osric started with a somewhat stern tone, but when he looked up and saw my tear-filled eyes, his voice immediately softened. The tears suddenly fell, and I cried, "Okay." Osric's expression became panicked. He put away the first aid supplies and pulled me into his arms, gently wiping away my fallen tears with one hand. "It's my fault, it's my fault." I shook my head, but the tears were completely out of control. Osric held me on the sofa for a long time until my emotions calmed down. Looking at his hand holding mine, I asked in a low voice, "Sir, is your father Barnaby Lycett?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I clearly felt Osric's body stiffen. Osric responded with a low ahem. "I only found out my father was Barnaby Lycett when I was 14. A light laugh tinged with mockery. "Ridiculous, isn't it?" I shook my head. "What's ridiculous is me. He found out his father was Barnaby Lycett at 14, while I, at 21, discovered the evil fruits sown by my own father." Osric had another nightmare. In the past, I never knew what he dreamed about, but this time I did. When he held my hand and repeatedly said "Save me," my heart felt like it was being torn into countless pieces. Later, Barnaby came over once more, leaving me a plane ticket and a bank card without a PIN. I kept them in a drawer where Osric would never look. I've been at Osric's place for 2 months now, and I've never cooked a meal for him. Every time he comes home, he carries me to the kitchen and lets me sit on the counter to watch him cook. He hardly lets me do anything, except homework. Today, while Osric was out, I prepared a table full of dishes. When he got home, he looked at the food on the table in disbelief. "Didn't I tell you not to do these things? What if you hurt yourself?" Osric took my hand. I shook my head with a smile. "I used to do this at home too." Osric looked at my face. "Are you homesick?" I quickly lowered my head and shook it, now instinctively avoiding Osric's gaze on my face. "I'm afraid he'll think of that person when he sees me. Because of our similar noses and eyes." I gently pulled my hand away and took a bottle of red wine that I had already decanted from the counter. "Sir, shall we have some wine today?" Osric didn't refuse. I looked at Osric's handsome face, reached out to take off his glasses, and emboldened by the alcohol, leaned in to kiss him. I whispered in his ear, "Sir, I like you." As I was about to get up, Osric caught me, and I fell into his arms. Then a kiss fell, lingering and passionate. We kissed from the dining room to the bedroom. When my clothes were pulled down to my shoulders, Osric stopped. He lay on top of me, breathing heavily. I blinked softly and called out gently, "Sir." Osric's breathing became more rapid. He covered my eyes with his hand and coaxed in my ear, "Jillian, can we wait until you graduate?" "No. I can't wait that long." But before I could make another move, Osric got up from on top of me and tucked me tightly in the duvet. "All right, Osric, you'll regret your actions now for the rest of your life." I was burning with anger, but then I fell asleep because I had drunk too much. When I woke up, Osric had already gone to teach. He has 2 classes today. That's why Barnaby bought the plane ticket for today. I put on a baseball cap, plugged in the earphones I used when I first met Osric, hugged his photo album, and boarded that plane. I left Osric a very long letter, explaining why I was leaving, begging him not to come looking for me, hoping he could forgive himself and let go of that past. I told my mom that the university had sent me abroad for further studies, hoping she wouldn't worry and would take care of herself. I also told her about my relationship with Osric. She was very surprised about this and said that if Osric found her, she wouldn't tell him any information about me. I think her attitude is probably the same as Barnaby's, hoping that Osric and I will never have anything to do with each other. The world suddenly seemed to quiet down. Every day, apart from going to class, I just stay in my little room. The whole world is just me and Osric in that photo album. I wonder if Osric still has nightmares. And I've started having nightmares. Longing is like a demon that can gnaw at your heart, and as time passes, it has torn my heart into pieces. It turns out that not everything can be healed by time. I finally found something to do in my spare time. I started writing a novel on a niche online platform, telling the story of Osric and me. It was a good thing, because only when I was writing did I feel like Osric was still by my side, preventing me from being consumed by longing. However, I told a lie. In the novel's ending, Osric and I lived happily ever after. I selfishly wrote us a child named Meredith Lysett. Every day I would read my novel over and over again, as if in a parallel universe we were truly together. The novel sparked a wave of student-teacher romance on the platform, which I hadn't expected. More and more people commented on my novel, wishing us eternal happiness. Looking at those comments, I felt even more that Osric and I were actually together, only I was unfortunately stuck on the other side of a parallel world. Time passed steadily for over 2 years. When the popularity of my novel cooled down and I faded back into obscurity, I received a comment on my story. I clicked on the little red dot and saw a comment from a user with a system-generated nickname. "As your teacher, I never taught you to lie." That cold sentence made up of emotionless words appeared on my computer screen. My hand holding the mouse trembled. The reason I chose to write on this platform was firstly because it was discreet enough, and secondly because Osric would never read novels. But I hadn't anticipated the novel becoming popular, nor had I expected Osric to read it. My first thought was to delete my account and disappear from the internet. Before I could move my hand, a private message popped up, followed by 2, 3, 4 more. At this point, my heart was in my throat. Logic told me not to open them, but my hand still clicked on the messages at my heart's insistence. "Jillian, don't delete your account. Jillian, it's been almost 3 years. I've been to hundreds of cities but couldn't find you. Jillian, how could I not know? How could I not know you're Bertram Tennant's daughter? I knew from the first moment I saw you. I thought, how could someone like that have a daughter like you? Seeing you hiding behind the dormitory, secretly bandaging a stray cat's wound. I wondered, how could someone like that have a daughter as pure as you? I lived in darkness, sinking in a swamp, while you were as pure as a blank sheet of paper. How could that be? Until I investigated your past, until you registered on the forum I created, until everything was out of my control. The messages kept popping up, full of Osric's urgency. He was afraid that if he was a moment late, I would disappear again. Jillian, you have nothing to do with him. Only you alone can pull me out of this nightmare. I wept uncontrollably. I couldn't imagine how Osric had endured all these years. He knew everything, yet told me nothing. Things that shouldn't have been his burden, he bore alone. Jillian Tennant, will you come back? I'm begging you, will you come back? The last message hung on the screen. I could never refuse any of Osric's requests. I slowly typed, yes. It was just in time for the end of the term. I sorted everything out and bought a ticket back. All the passengers had already left the plane when I slowly walked out wearing my headphones. There were many people waiting at the arrival gate, but I immediately spotted the one wearing a mask, only his eyes visible. He walked up to me, and I lowered my head nervously, softly saying, "Professor." He gently cupped my chin with one hand, forcing me to look up at him. I saw countless tiny stars in his eyes, his excessively handsome face half hidden by the mask. "You little ingrate, finally decided to come back?" At that moment, the passing crowd seemed to vanish instantly, leaving only Osric and me in the world. I gently hugged his slender body, sniffling in his embrace. "Professor, I'm back. Back to make it up to you. I'll definitely make it up to you properly."